You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Grounded generation refers to the practice of ensuring that AI-generated text is directly supported by evidence drawn from reliable sources, rather than relying solely on the model's internal patterns. In traditional generation, large language models produce fluent and often convincing responses, but without an explicit tether to external data, users cannot be sure whether those responses are factually correct. Grounded generation solves this problem by building a bridge between retrieval and output. The system must not only answer but also show where the answer came from. It is the difference between a student giving an opinion and a student citing a textbook chapter or a research paper to back up their claim. This approach is not just a technical choice but a philosophical one. It reflects the idea that I should be accountable, that its statements should be verifiable, and that trust requires transparency. Without grounding, even accurate answers can feel uncertain, because users cannot see the evidence. Attribution sits at the heart of grounded generation, because it is the mechanism by which a model shows the link between its words and its sources. Just as an academic paper gains credibility by including footnotes and bibliographies, AI systems earn trust by attributing claims to specific documents, authors, or datasets. Attribution is more than formality, it is accountability in action. If a chatbot explains a new policy and cites the official HR manual, employees are far more likely to follow the advice. If it gives the same answer without attribution, doubts linger. Did the system invent this, or is it quoting something reliable? Attribution also shifts responsibility in helpful ways. By pointing to a source, the system makes it clear that the evidence lies outside itself, allowing users to independently verify. This act of pointing outward reinforces confidence and prevents blind reliance on machine output. Citation practices operationalize attribution by structuring how sources appear within or alongside generated text. Citations can be as simple as appending a link to the bottom of an answer, or as sophisticated as inline references that appear immediately after specific claims. For example, a system answering a legal question may include a direct citation to Smith v. Jones, 2008, Section 4, allowing the user to locate the precise passage. Other systems may choose summaries, where cited sources are listed in a short bibliography following the answer. The style matters because different domains expect different norms. Academics expect numbered references, lawyers expect case citations, and casual users may prefer clickable links. The design of citation practices shapes whether grounding feels natural and trustworthy, or clunky and distracting. In every case, the purpose remains the same: making evidence visible and accessible so that users can trace claims back to their origin. Provenance tracking expands the idea of citation by recording not only the final source, but also the path by which information was retrieved, filtered, and presented. It is one thing to say that an answer came from a report, but another to specify which version of the report, which section, and how it was processed before being used. Provenance matters for auditability. In regulated industries, such as healthcare or finance, it may be required to show not just that the answer is grounded, but how the retrieval system selected one document over another. Provenance also protects against subtle errors, such as outdated or tampered data. If a system can show that a policy document was retrieved from the official company intranet at a particular timestamp, users gain confidence not only in the content, but in the reliability of the pipeline itself. Provenance transforms grounding into a full record of informational integrity. User confidence and transparency are deeply intertwined with grounding. When people see visible citations, they are more willing to accept AI outputs, even if they remain skeptical of AI in general. Transparency reduces the black box feeling that often surrounds large language models. Consider the difference between two scenarios. In the first, A medical chatbot explains that aspirin reduces fever. In the second, it gives the same advice but cites the American Medical Association's guidelines. The second answer feels safer because the user sees the chain of accountability. Transparency also encourages critical thinking, as users can check sources and decide whether to trust them. This creates a healthier relationship between humans and AI, one based on evidence and verification rather than blind trust. Grounded generation thus not only improves factual reliability, but also changes how users psychologically relate to machine outputs. One of the main reasons grounded generation is essential is its distinction from hallucination. Hallucination occurs when models produce text that is fluent but factually false, often mixing real details with fabricated ones. For example, a model might invent a non-existent court ruling or cite a book that was never published. Without grounding, these hallucinations are difficult to detect, especially when the text appears confident. Grounded generation counters this by forcing the model to anchor statements in actual retrieved evidence. If no relevant source exists, the system may be designed to admit uncertainty rather than fabricate. In this way, grounding becomes a guardrail, steering generation away from plausible-sounding but false content. It reduces risk and increases safety, making AI outputs more reliable for serious use cases such as law, healthcare, or journalism. Evaluation of groundedness is an emerging area that measures how well generated text aligns with its cited evidence. Unlike traditional accuracy metrics, which judge correctness alone, evaluation of groundedness asks whether the citation actually supports the claim. For example, if a model states the policy requires weekly reporting and cites a document that mentions monthly reporting, the output is not properly grounded, even if the claim is plausible. Systems may be scored on citation alignment, correctness, and coverage. Researchers have begun building benchmarks where human evaluators compare generated answers against their sources, noting mismatches. This evaluation is critical because grounding can fail subtly, creating an illusion of reliability when citations are misaligned. Testing groundedness ensures that systems are not just decorating outputs with references, but truly linking evidence to claims in a consistent way. Automating grounded generation introduces technical challenges. Linking specific sentences or phrases in an answer to specific sentences in a document requires precise alignment, something models are not naturally designed for. Retrieval systems may deliver long documents, and deciding which passage supports which claim is non-trivial. Sometimes multiple sources partially overlap, making attribution ambiguous. Furthermore, formatting sources for users, deciding when to cite inline, when to summarize, and how much context to provide, is a design problem as well as a technical one. Automation must balance completeness with readability, avoiding overwhelming users with citations but also avoiding vagueness. Solving these challenges requires blending retrieval methods, alignment algorithms, and interface design, turning grounding into a system-wide concern rather than a simple add-on feature. Over-reliance on citations creates its own risks. If citations are incomplete, outdated, or poorly chosen, they may give a false sense of security. For instance, a system might answer a legal query and cite a case that is tangentially related, leaving the user to assume that the claim is fully supported. In this case, the presence of a citation misleads rather than clarifies. Users may also begin to trust citations blindly, assuming that the presence of a source means the content is reliable, when in reality, the source may not support the specific point. Over-reliance risks turning grounding into a ritual rather than a safeguard. It highlights the need for careful design. Grounding must be accurate and relevant, not just visible. Otherwise, it risks creating trust where none is deserved, undermining the very purpose it was meant to serve. Formats for citations vary widely, and each choice influences user perception. Inline references such as one or author year integrate evidence seamlessly but may clutter text. Summaries at the end of answers, such as a sources list, Keep text clean, but require users to cross-reference manually. Some systems experiment with interactive citations, where clicking expands the relevant passage directly within the interface. The right format depends on the audience. Researchers may prefer detailed, standardized styles, while casual users may want simple, clickable links. These formatting decisions matter because they shape how easily users can verify claims. Poorly designed citations may frustrate users or reduce trust, while well-designed ones can enhance clarity and credibility. Formats are therefore not cosmetic choices but core elements of how grounding succeeds in practice. Attribution granularity further shapes the usefulness of grounding. At a broad level, a system may cite entire documents such as Company Handbook, 2022. This is simple but often too vague, forcing users to dig through the document themselves. More precise systems offer section-level or even sentence-level attribution, pinpointing exactly where evidence lies. For example, citing Section 4.3 of the Employee Benefits Policy is far more actionable than citing the entire policy. Granularity also affects trust. Vague attribution feels like hand-waving, while precise attribution demonstrates rigor. Achieving fine-grained attribution, however, requires more sophisticated retrieval and alignment, increasing system complexity. Deciding on the right level of granularity is therefore a trade-off between usability, technical feasibility, and domain expectations. Enterprise requirements add further weight to grounding. In regulated industries, organizations cannot simply rely on plausible answers. They must prove that responses are anchored in approved sources. Compliance regimes in finance, healthcare, or law demand not only correctness but provenance: who wrote the source, when it was updated, and how it was processed. For example, a bank may require that any AI-generated answer about lending rules cite the official compliance manual published that quarter, not an outdated version or an external website. Enterprises may also require audit logs showing exactly which documents supported each output. These requirements transform grounding from a trust-enhancing feature into a compliance necessity. Without grounding, enterprise AI cannot be deployed safely in such environments. Despite its promise, grounded generation is limited by the capabilities of current systems. Most large language models were not trained to produce citations natively, and attempts to bolt-on grounding often expose mismatches. Models may fabricate citations, misalign evidence, or fail to distinguish between partial and complete support. Retrieval systems may return relevant documents, but the model may summarize incorrectly, creating subtle errors. Current systems can gesture toward grounding, but they cannot guarantee perfect citation accuracy. This limitation makes human oversight and careful evaluation necessary, particularly in high-stakes contexts. It also highlights why grounding is not a solved problem but an ongoing research frontier. User interface considerations influence how grounding is perceived, sometimes more than the technical pipeline itself. The same evidence may be displayed in ways that inspire trust or skepticism depending on design. A cluttered answer filled with raw URLs may overwhelm, while a clean summary with expandable sources feels polished. The timing of citations also matters. Some users prefer inline evidence immediately after a claim, while others prefer to check sources only if they doubt the answer. Designers must consider readability, accessibility, and domain norms. Grounding does not end with retrieval and alignment. It culminates in presentation. A technically sound grounding pipeline can still fail if the interface discourages users from checking or understanding the sources. Grounded generation often pairs with structured outputs to further standardize responses. For instance, a compliance assistant might return not just free text answers but also a table showing each claim and its supporting documents section. Structured grounding makes verification easier and reduces ambiguity. It aligns well with enterprise workflows where answers must be auditable and reproducible. This pairing reflects the growing recognition that free-flowing natural language alone is not enough for high-stakes applications. Structure and grounding together provide clarity, consistency, and accountability. When combined, they transform AI outputs from plausible suggestions into reliable, verifiable artifacts that organizations can use with confidence. Techniques for grounded generation vary, but at their core they all seek to enforce a connection between what the AI outputs and the evidence it was provided. One approach is to build systems that literally will not produce an answer unless they can link it back to a retrieved document, policy, or dataset. This is often called hard grounding, where the model must weave its answer from retrieved text and simultaneously provide a citation. Another approach is soft grounding, where the model is encouraged but not strictly required to include references, often through prompt engineering or fine-tuning. The choice between these methods reflects different trade-offs. Strict enforcement ensures accuracy but can reduce fluency, while looser enforcement maintains natural flow but risks drifting into unsupported claims. In practice, most organizations experiment with both, tuning their systems for the right balance of groundedness and readability. Retrieval Augmented Generation, often abbreviated RAG, has become one of the most natural frameworks for supporting grounded outputs. In these systems, a retriever first selects relevant documents, and the generator then composes an answer that incorporates this evidence. Because the retriever can provide citations along with content, grounding becomes a built-in feature. For instance, a medical RAG system may pull the latest clinical trial summaries and feed them to the model, which then crafts an answer about treatment guidelines while pointing back to the specific trial reports. RAG pipelines highlight the synergy between retrieval and generation. Retrieval provides relevance, while generation provides fluency, and grounding is the connective tissue that ensures trust. Without grounding, RAG systems risk looking like any other AI chatbot. With grounding, they become trusted assistants capable of supporting professional decision-making. Verification layers add another dimension to grounding by checking whether the cited evidence truly supports the generated claims. This step addresses a subtle problem. Models may sometimes cite the right document, but misrepresent its content. A verification layer can reread both the generated answer and the cited source, flagging mismatches. For example, if a model claims, "The policy requires weekly reporting," but the cited document states monthly reporting, the verification layer identifies the error before the answer reaches the user. These systems can operate automatically using secondary models or involve human-in-the-loop checks in sensitive contexts. Verification is essential because grounding is not just about attaching a source, it is about ensuring that the relationship between text and evidence is faithful. Without verification, grounding risks devolving into decorative citations rather than true accountability. Confidence scoring complements grounding by expressing not only what the system claims but how certain it is. Some grounded systems present answers with numerical confidence levels tied to the quality and consistency of the evidence. A model might return a response with 95% confidence if multiple sources agree, but only 60% if evidence is sparse or contradictory. These scores can help users calibrate their reliance on AI outputs, just as people might trust a doctor more when they say, "I'm certain" versus "I think." Of course, confidence scores themselves can mislead if poorly calibrated, so they must be tied to actual evaluation of evidence rather than arbitrary thresholds. When implemented carefully, confidence scoring deepens grounded generation by layering transparency not just on what is said, but also on how strongly the system stands behind it. Human oversight remains a critical safeguard in grounded generation, especially in high-stakes contexts where errors carry serious consequences. For example, in legal or medical applications, AI-generated answers with citations are often reviewed by professionals before being acted upon. Grounding provides the evidence trail that humans can audit, speeding their review process by showing where claims came from. This partnership illustrates how AI and human expertise can complement one another. The AI accelerates information retrieval and synthesis, while humans provide the judgment to confirm accuracy. Grounded generation thus does not eliminate human roles but reconfigures them, shifting humans from primary researchers to reviewers and decision-makers. This hybrid approach is often the only acceptable path in regulated domains, where trust cannot rest solely on machines. Trade-offs in grounded generation are unavoidable. While grounding improves trust and accountability, it often comes at the cost of fluency or creativity. A model forced to reference evidence may produce clunkier prose, with more interruptions for citations or disclaimers. In creative or exploratory tasks, this rigidity can feel limiting, as users may prefer fluid speculation over rigid attribution. Grounding also increases complexity, requiring retrieval pipelines, citation formatting, and verification steps that slow response times. Organizations must therefore decide where grounding is most valuable and where lighter methods may suffice. For instance, in entertainment chatbots, grounding may be unnecessary, but in enterprise systems, it is essential. These trade-offs underscore that grounding is not a universal requirement but a design choice tied to context and stakes. Latency costs are one of the most practical drawbacks of grounding. To produce grounded outputs, systems must perform additional steps: retrieving documents, aligning content, formatting citations, and sometimes verifying claims. Each of these introduces delays compared to freeform generation. For consumer chatbots, where users expect instantaneous answers, even half a second of extra latency may feel noticeable. In enterprise contexts, delays may be tolerated if the payoff is trust and reliability, but at scale, latency adds up. Engineers often optimize by caching frequent queries, pre-generating embeddings, or limiting the number of documents retrieved. These solutions reduce but cannot eliminate the fundamental truth: grounding is slower than unguided generation. The challenge is to make that trade-off acceptable to users by demonstrating the value of trustworthy answers. Scaling challenges compound the latency issue when grounded generation is deployed across massive datasets. If a system must cite evidence from millions of documents, maintaining indexes, embeddings, and retrieval infrastructure becomes expensive. Generating citations for billions of queries daily requires highly optimized pipelines that balance freshness, accuracy, and cost. For example, a news search assistant must update sources constantly while still generating grounded answers quickly. Scaling also raises subtle issues like ensuring consistent citation style across outputs or maintaining provenance records for compliance. Organizations must therefore invest not only in model design but in robust infrastructure for retrieval and indexing at scale. Without this backbone, grounded generation cannot expand beyond prototypes into production. Security considerations introduce additional layers of complexity to grounding. Improper attribution may expose confidential sources, such as internal company documents or sensitive research drafts, that were never meant for public disclosure. If a model cites restricted material as evidence, it could inadvertently leak proprietary or regulated information. Grounding systems must therefore enforce access controls at the retrieval stage, ensuring that only permissible sources are available for citation. In addition, provenance tracking must verify not only what is cited but also whether the source was legally or ethically accessible. In this sense, grounding is not only a technical challenge but a compliance challenge, requiring alignment with privacy, intellectual property, and data protection standards. Grounding requirements vary widely across domains, reflecting different cultural norms and professional expectations. In journalism, attribution is central to credibility. Readers expect citations to original reporting or official documents. In medicine, grounding must point to peer-reviewed studies or clinical guidelines, since lives may depend on the information. In law, citations to statutes or case precedents are mandatory for professional acceptability. Enterprise environments often demand grounding in internal documents, like HR policies or compliance manuals, for both accuracy and auditability. Each of these domains defines relevance and evidence differently, so grounding cannot be one-size-fits-all. Systems must adapt their grounding strategies to meet the trust standards of the communities they serve. Evaluation frameworks are emerging to assess grounded generation specifically. Traditional metrics like recall or precision are not enough. New benchmarks test whether citations are accurate, aligned, and truly support the claims made. These evaluations often involve human reviewers judging whether an answer's evidence matches its content. Automated evaluation methods are also being explored, using secondary models to assess groundedness. The goal is to ensure that grounding is not just visible but meaningful. A system that produces many citations but misuses them should not score well. Evaluation frameworks help organizations distinguish between superficial grounding and genuine accountability, pushing the field toward more reliable implementations. Research into grounding is moving quickly, with new techniques emerging to generate and verify citations dynamically. Some experiments involve training models explicitly on citation tasks, teaching them to map outputs to source passages with high fidelity. Others involve post-processing layers that attach citations after generation by aligning text with retrieved documents. Verification models are also being developed to double-check that cited evidence truly supports each claim. These innovations reflect recognition that grounding is not trivial, but requires its own specialized methods. As research progresses, grounded generation is likely to become more accurate, flexible, and user-friendly, moving from experimental feature to standard expectation. Provenance standards are also developing, as industries push for consistent ways of recording and sharing how AI-generated outputs are sourced. Metadata frameworks are being proposed to capture details such as when a document was retrieved, which system processed it, and how it was used in generation. These standards matter because they allow grounded generation to scale across organizations while maintaining interoperability. For example, regulators may require provenance metadata to audit AI outputs, ensuring compliance with industry laws. Standardization transforms grounding from an ad hoc practice into a shared language of accountability, allowing different systems to communicate provenance in consistent, machine-readable ways. User education plays a vital role in making grounding effective. Even the best citation practices fail if users do not understand how to interpret them. Many people are not accustomed to checking AI outputs against sources, so they may overtrust or undertrust citations. Training users to click through references, verify claims, and question gaps is essential for creating a culture of evidence-based interaction with AI. In enterprises, this may mean workshops on how to use grounded assistance responsibly. For consumers, it may involve designing interfaces that gently encourage verification. Grounded generation shifts responsibility onto users as well as systems, requiring cultural as well as technical adaptation. Future outlooks for grounded generation suggest that it will become standard in enterprise and professional deployments. As regulators demand transparency, and as users grow more cautious about trusting unverified AI outputs, grounding will move from nice to have to mandatory. Enterprises will likely require grounding for any AI that touches compliance, legal, or customer-facing workflows. Consumers, too, will begin expecting citations as default, much as they expect hyperlinks in digital journalism today. Grounded generation is therefore not just an improvement, but a transformation of how AI communicates, moving from opaque fluency to transparent accountability. Finally, grounded generation naturally leads to structured generation, where outputs are organized into predictable formats that integrate citations directly. A compliance report might list each claim alongside its source, while a medical summary might present findings in a table with references. This pairing creates systems that are not only trustworthy but also efficient, as users can navigate answers quickly and verify them easily. Structured outputs are often the logical extension of grounding, providing both transparency and usability. Together, they represent the future direction of retrieval-augmented AI, not only fluent and intelligent, but also clear, verifiable, and standardized. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.